They changed my locks while I was under anesthesia, and by breakfast they were already counting my pension. I woke in recovery, with the taste of metal on my tongue, and the April wind shouldering the hospital window at St. Vincent's in Cleveland, Ohio. A nurse handed me my phone, 4 missed calls from my neighbor Ruth, and a text from my son. "Don't stress. Dad, I secured the house. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from." When Ruth finally answered, I heard the kind of fear that makes people speak softly, like sound might break the truth. "They came at 3 in the morning, she said. "A rented box truck. You're Daniel, 2 other fellas. They swapped the brass lock for a black smart one. I've got it on my doorbell camera. Timestamp says 3:06 a.m. to 3:18. Her voice snagged. "They took your cedar chest. By noon, a volunteer driver ran me home. April in Cleveland is a coin toss of cold and thaw. That day, the thaw had turned my front garden to soft earth. Tire marks carved through my wife's rose bushes like someone had dragged a bad decision right across her memory. My brass key hit the new deadbolt and stopped dead. I pressed the doorbell out of habit. No chime, only the quiet of a house that no longer recognized me. There was a paper taped to the glass. Notice of renovation, do not enter. No contractor's name, no permit number. Through the side window, I could see the imprint where the cedar chest had sat for a decade, a paler rectangle on the rug, like a missing tooth. On the kitchen counter, a crumpled contractor bill, $2,800 for demo prep, scrawled signature D. Hale. My name appeared nowhere. I slipped the bill into my wallet and underlined the amount with my thumbnail, the way I used to trace circuits with a pencil before opening a panel. I called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. "Son, call me back." I'm standing on my own porch with my own key in my hand. I hung up and hit play on the only voicemail he'd left at dawn. "It's safer this way." "Dad, you lose track sometimes." Safer. The word settled in my chest like a weight. I was a union electrician for 38 years. I'd labeled breakers and saved receipts in folders by month. The house was paid off since 2011. My wife's photograph watched me from behind the glass, steady and unimpressed with his story. Ruth shuffled across our property line in her cardigan, pressing a thumb drive into my palm. "Keep this safe," she said. "It shows the truck, and him opening your safe box." Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. "You tell me what you need." I dialed a locksmith. He arrived at 4:40 p.m., a man with wind-burned cheeks and kind eyes, and frowned at the deadbolt. "New smart unit," he murmured. "Fresh strike plate. Whoever installed it wanted no play in the frame. He asked for proof I lived there, and I showed him my driver's license and the April gas bill I kept folded in my coat." He sighed. "Family dispute? I can't touch it without written consent or a police escort. You don't want it to look like you're breaking in." So I sat on my porch swing, with my hospital bracelet still on, April 12th, listening to the chains rattle against the slats, smelling the mud where the roses used to be. I wrote the date on an envelope and slid my useless brass key inside. Original key, April 12th. Then I opened a new page in my notebook and titled it in block letters, "They changed my locks while I was asleep." I didn't kick the door in. I made a list. Tomorrow would be the bank. And after that, the law. The morning after the lock change felt colder than it should have for mid-April in Cleveland. I hadn't slept. I sat on my porch swing until sunrise, staring at the brass key in my hand. It was smooth from years of use, thousands of turns, one gentle click every night before bed. Now it was just metal, meaningless. Ruth brought me coffee in a paper cup. "You should call the police," she said. "I will," I told her, though I didn't believe it yet. But first, the bank. The idea of Daniel, my son, changing my locks while I was in surgery didn't fit anywhere in my mind. It didn't compute. Just 3 weeks earlier, he'd dropped by with his little boy and helped me clean the gutters. I'd handed him my house key because I trusted him to lock up while I napped. That same key became my undoing. I looked across the yard where my wife's rose bushes once grew. The tracks from the moving truck had hardened in the overnight frost. Tire prints and betrayal. both pressed deep into the soil. At 8:40 a.m., I walked to the Lakeshore Bank branch 3 blocks away. Carla, the manager, had known me for years. When she saw me limping in my hospital wristband, her eyes widened. "You're supposed to be resting." "Carla," I said, "I think my son tried to borrow against my house." She took me into her office and closed the glass door. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us. I slid the crumpled 2,800 bill across her desk. "I found this on my counter. My son's name on it." "Not mine." Her fingers danced over the keyboard, face tightening as she read the screen. "There was an online inquiry yesterday morning, 9:22 a.m., for a $120,000 home equity line. It didn't go through because it flagged for incomplete authorization. Your name's still primary, but—" She stopped. "You didn't apply for that, did you?" I felt something burn behind my ribs. "No, freeze any new pulls, please." She nodded, printed a 1-page memo, and handed it to me. "Here, this flags your profile. Anyone attempts access, we get a call. Keep this copy." It's dated April 13th. I tucked it into the folder I'd started last night. I could already picture the court someday, the memo in an evidence stack, my handwriting on the corner. Carla reached across the desk. "You've always been sharp, Mr. Hale. Don't let him make you doubt yourself." When I stepped outside, the wind off Lake Erie slapped my face awake. I didn't drive, I walked. Past the bakery where my wife and I bought bread every Sunday, past the hardware store where I used to buy brass screws just because I liked the weight of them. Every street corner felt like a ghost of something we'd built together. Back home, I found Ruth kneeling near the roses. "I saved something," she said quietly. In her gloved hand was a single undamaged bloom, clipped from a branch the truck hadn't crushed. She handed it to me like a flag. "You're not crazy, Hank." He crossed a line. That night I replayed Daniel's voicemail on loop. "It's safer this way, Dad. You lose track sometimes." My own son calling me senile. The same man who used to ask me to double-check his math homework. I listened to that sentence until my phone battery died. And then I sat there in the dark, trying to remember when love had turned into leverage. At 10 p.m., Pastor Lewis called. He'd heard from Ruth. "You need to document everything," he said. "Every call, every receipt, every witness. You start a paper trail before he starts his story." "I already have," I told him. "I've got the bill, the memo, the videos." "Good, and call an attorney tomorrow. Someone who deals with elder exploitation. You're not the first man to be locked out of his own home by blood." When I hung up, I pulled the hospital bracelet off my wrist and set it on the table beside the envelope that held my brass key. 2 reminders, one of survival, one of loss. I opened the rainy day folder I'd built with my wife years ago, our mortgage satisfaction from 2011. The insurance declaration and the last photo we took before she passed. She's smiling in that picture, paint on her fingers from touching up the porch rail. That house was her heart, I whispered to her photo. "They think you're not watching, but you always are." Sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of my son as a boy, muddy knees, proud grin, handing me a bent nail he called treasure. I woke at dawn, with tears dried on my cheek. Before sunrise, Ruth texted, "Hank, my camera caught more. Good at 11 a.m. He's carrying your fire safe." That's when something inside me clicked. Not rage, not grief, something steadier. The same focus I'd had 30 years ago when tracing a shorted wire through a blacked-out factory floor. One connection at a time until the current runs clean. I didn't kick the door in. I charged my phone, printed the bank memo, and labeled the folder's next page, April 13th, evidence log. By 9 a.m., I had an appointment with attorney Harrow, set for April 15th, 10 a.m., courtesy of Pastor Lewis's referral. For the first time since surgery, I felt awake, not as a patient, not as a victim, but as a man preparing for inspection. The house wasn't gone. Not yet. And this time I wasn't just fighting for walls. I was fighting for my name on the deed. April 13th began like any other spring morning in Cleveland. Gray light, the smell of wet pavement, and the hum of trucks on Lakeshore Boulevard. But that day wasn't ordinary. That day I was done grieving. I was documenting. I shaved, put on my old Union jacket, and walked the 3 blocks to Lakeshore Bank again. Carla spotted me instantly. "Back already?" she asked, half concerned, half curious. "Yeah," I said, sliding a manila folder onto her desk. "Fraud alert's working, right?" She opened the file and nodded. "Frozen solid. No new lines can be drawn against your property without you present." "Good," I said, tapping the counter with my pen. "Now I need a copy of the transaction inquiry from yesterday, the one that almost went through." Carla printed it out, stamped it, and slid it across the table. "If this goes to court, you'll want that timestamp, 9:22 a.m., April 12th. I smiled faintly. "That's the same time I was under anesthesia." Her expression softened. "You're building a paper trail, Hank. Smart. 38 years wiring circuits," I told her. "You learn to trace where every current goes." Outside the bank, the cold air cleared my head. The brass key still sat heavy in my pocket, useless but symbolic. I wasn't just a father anymore, I was evidence in motion. Ruth met me halfway down the block, clutching a small envelope. "Another one," she said. Inside were 3 stills from her doorbell camera. Daniel under the porch light, hauling my safe. One shot caught the tattoo on his wrist, proof it was him. I added it to the folder and wrote April 13th, Exhibit 2, Safe Removal. That afternoon, I sat at my dining table, or what used to be mine, and filled a spiral notebook I labeled Ledger. First page, April 12th, surgery. Lock change. Evidence begins. At the top of page 2, I wrote to-do list, contact attorney Harrow, April 15th, 10 a.m. File bank fraud alert, done. Photograph property damage, roses, in backgate. Identify contractor listed on $2,800 bill. Print Ruth's videos and timestamps. When you've spent decades on job sites, you learn structure, wire color, load order, sequence. That same structure was now my revenge. By evening, Pastor Lewis dropped by. He wore his old gray coat, the same one from my wife's memorial. "You holding up?" he asked. "Depends on the hour," I said. He looked at the table, scattered with receipts, bills, and notes. "Looks like you're building a case." "I'm not letting him paint me senile, Pastor." He smiled gently. "Then make sure every page has a date. Courts love dates more than anger." He slid a small card across the table. "Harrow, elder exploitation specialist. Sharp as they come. He helped Mrs. Greeley last year when her nephew sold her car without consent. You'll like him." I tucked the card into the folder. 10 a.m., April 15th. I'll be there. Ruth called that night. "They came back," she whispered. "A white van, same 2 guys, tried the side fence but left when they saw the camera light." I jotted the time down, 10:47 p.m. My notebook was now a diary of trespass. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my yard with my phone camera. Every boot print, every broken stem, every scuff mark on the siding, documented. I even photographed the deadbolt model number, Model S410, serial 1274D. I could hear my wife's voice teasing, "You and your labels, Hank." But it was the one thing that still felt like control. At 4 p.m., I got a text from Daniel. "Dad, stop involving people. You're confused. This is for your safety." I stared at that message for a full minute before replying, "Return the key. We talk at Pastor's office Wednesday." He read it instantly. No response. I printed the message thread and stapled it behind the contractor bill. Evidence doesn't argue. It just sits and waits to be believed. Later that evening, I laid everything out across the kitchen table at Ruth's house, since mine was still off limits. She brewed tea while I assembled the puzzle. Carla's memo proves the bank attempt. "Your camera shows the lock change. The contractor bill ties his name. I just need one more piece." "What's that?" she asked. "A direct admission or something close." She smiled sadly. "You always said you could wire a building blindfolded. Maybe you can wire a trap too," I nodded. The electrician in me stirred awake. Circuits only make sense when they're complete. I added one more note to my ledger, April 14th, visit locksmith. Trace cash payment. Obtain receipt copy. That was tomorrow's job. As I closed the folder, I glanced at my wife's photo taped to the inside cover. She'd been the organized one, the planner. Every label in this binder felt like an echo of her voice. I whispered, "We're not kicking the door in, love. We're opening it the right way." Outside, the lake wind rattled the gutters, and for the first time since surgery, the sound didn't scare me. It sounded like movement, slow, deliberate, lawful. By night's end, my binder was 2 inches thick. Every page had a purpose, every receipt a heartbeat. Tomorrow, I'd bring that binder to Harrow. And Daniel would finally realize I wasn't losing track. I was tracking him. April 14th started with the faint smell of rain and that heavy Cleveland air that sticks to your lungs. The kind of morning that makes you believe something's about to shift. I shaved, put on my cleanest flannel, and tucked my binder under my arm. It was time to turn my anger into evidence. The locksmith's shop sat on Euclid Avenue, Miguel's 24-hour keys and security. Bells jingled as I stepped inside. Miguel was behind the counter, wiping oil off his hands. "You the gentleman who called about a deadbolt job last night?" "I'm the gentleman whose son hired you," I said. He froze. Then slowly, "Black smart deadbolt? Installed at 2:10 a.m.? I nodded. Miguel looked down. "Yeah. He paid cash, $375. Wanted it done fast. Said his dad was confused, needed safety locks." I kept my voice calm. "Did he say his name?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Daniel Hale." I felt my jaw tighten. "Would you be willing to write that down?" Miguel sighed, then grabbed a work order pad. "Customer identified as Daniel Hale. Lock installed April 12th, 2:10 a.m. Paid cash." He signed it, slid it across. I shook his hand. "You might have just restored my home, son." As I left, he called out, "Hey, mind if I print the order for your lawyer?" "Print too," I said. "He'll need copies." Back outside, the drizzle started. I walked 2 blocks to City Hall, my boots clicking on wet stone, and stopped at the public records counter. "Looking up permit applications," I told the clerk. "Address?" I gave her mine. She typed, then frowned. "A minor interior demo notice filed online last week by Daniel Hale. Was it approved?" "No," she said. "Never completed. No permit issued. Can I get a printout?" She printed the record and stamped it. That's when I started to feel something new, not rage, not grief, but momentum. Like I'd finally found the current that would short out his whole plan. At 10 a.m., I walked into Attorney Harrow's office, a beige building that smelled faintly of paper and coffee. He looked about my age, silver hair, sharp eyes, slow voice. "Mr. Hale," he said, shaking my hand, "tell me what brings you here." I laid the folder between us and opened it like a confession. He listened without interrupting. Not once. When I finished, he sat back and folded his hands. "Lock change while hospitalized. Attempted HELOC. Removal of personal property. This is classic elder exploitation. We'll move fast. I'm filing for injunctive relief to restore possession immediately." He typed up 3 letters, one to Daniel demanding the return of property and access, one to the contractor warning of civil liability, and one to the bank documenting the fraud attempt. "Sign here," he said. I signed each one in thick blue ink, my hand steady for the first time in days. Then he handed me another form. "Power of attorney, limited to legal filings. You'll keep control, but this lets me act on your behalf." I signed that too. "Delivery?" He asked. "Certified mail," I said. Every receipt, every signature. By 3:20 p.m., the letters were stamped and sealed. My name on the return label felt like armor. At 5 p.m., Pastor Lewis called. "You'll want to hear this," he said. "Daniel was at Sullivan's bar last night. Told someone by month's end, the old place will be liquid." Liquid. My house, my retirement. My wife's last rosebush. I wrote that quote in my ledger under April 14th. Then I added, confirmed public brag, possible witness. That night, Harrow emailed, Municipal Court. May 20th, 9 banners a.m. Hale vs. Hale. The subject line alone felt like justice cracking open. I sat at Ruth's kitchen table and read it twice. "May 20th, I whispered. He wanted to make me look senile. Let's see how clear I sound in court." Ruth poured tea. "You're really going through with this?" "Every line, every paper, every breath," I said. Later I walked home, stood before that locked door, and looked at the black smart deadbolt. The rain had stopped, and the porch light reflected on the slick paint. I ran my thumb over the cold metal. the tiny scratch above the keyhole. It wasn't a barrier anymore. It was evidence. I took a photo of it. Date stamped it on my phone. April 14th, 8:47 p.m. Then I turned and went back to Ruth's. Inside my binder, I added one last note for the night. Hearing scheduled. Evidence chain intact. No physical retaliation. Legal route only. I sealed it with a clip and whispered to my wife's picture. Tomorrow I'll file the complaint. And this time, love, the lights will stay on. I slept for the first time that week. The hum of rain against the window sounded like electricity, returning to a dead circuit. Steady, clean, alive. Between April 18th and April 22nd, the weather turned warm, but my hands stayed cold. Grief has a strange temperature. It freezes the places where trust used to live. I spent those days tightening my case, line by line, while Daniel dug his own hole deeper. On April 18th, my sister Ellen called from Columbus. "Hank, what's going on? Daniel says you've become combative." Her voice was tight, cautious, the way people talk when they've already heard one side. I took a slow breath. "He's painting me confused, Ellen. He changed my locks while I was under anesthesia. Is that true?" Ruth's camera caught it, and the bank memo proves he tried to pull a home equity loan. Silence. Then a soft, "Oh, Hank." "I'm not crazy," I said. "I'm careful." That night I wrote in my ledger, April 18th, family interference begins. Counter with documents, not emotion. The next morning, Carla from the bank called. "Mr. Hale, I've just sent your attorney a teller affidavit. The young man who came in didn't match your ID signature. We flagged it internally. The form's dated and notarized." "Thank you, Carla," I said.
"Keep every copy you have."
Her voice softened. "I'm sorry you're going through this." I smiled even though she couldn't see it. "Don't be. You just became part of the circuit." By April 20th, my binder had grown heavier. Photos, memos, printed texts. Every page was a nail sealing Daniel's own coffin of deceit. That afternoon, Ruth knocked on my back door, holding her phone. "Look at this!" She'd caught Daniel's men again, midday this time, testing the side gate. The camera light flashed in their faces. One muttered, "Forget it, there's a legal notice now." I zoomed in. The yellow paper taped to my fence read, "Property under legal hold. Access restricted." I'd printed it that morning, and it was already doing its job. When I told Harrow, he chuckled softly. "They're nervous," he said. "Good. Fear keeps hands off doorknobs." He just filed the complaint for unlawful lockout and elder exploitation. The hearing date, May 20th, was confirmed. On April 24th, the process server delivered the papers to Daniel's apartment at exactly 6:12 p.m. The man sent me a text afterward. Served and acknowledged. At 6:19, my phone lit up with a message from Daniel. "You'll regret this. You'll be out by summer." I stared at it, then screenshotted it and printed it. Underneath the print, I wrote in pen, "Threat, not fear." That evening, I walked into Sullivan's bar, the same place Pastor Lewis said Daniel had been bragging. The bartender, a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard, looked up. "You're Hank, right? Daniel's dad." "Unfortunately," he nodded slowly. "He ran a tab here, $612. Said he'd pay once he closed on some property. You want a statement?" I nodded. "Date it and sign it, please." He printed the register log, wrote the note and signed. Before I left, he added quietly, "He talks big when he's drunk." Said something about unlocking equity. Didn't sound like construction to me. I smiled thinly. "You'd make a fine witness." The next morning, Pastor Lewis arranged a mediation at his office for April 27th. "It's better to let him hang himself politely," he said. Daniel showed up late, smelling like whiskey, eyes bloodshot. He sat across from me and forced a grin. "Dad, you've got everyone against me." "I was protecting you." I laid my hospital bracelet on the table. "April 12th, while I was under anesthesia, you installed that lock." He looked away. "You forget things, old man." Pastor Lewis interrupted, voice calm but firm. "Let's stay civil." Daniel stood up suddenly, chair scraping. "You think a judge will believe you over me?" I leaned back. "I think the bank, the videos, the locksmith and the contractor might." He froze. "You talked to Miguel?" I talk to everyone now, he sneered. You'll die alone in that house. I looked him dead in the eye. Maybe, but I'll die in my house. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the cross on Pastor's wall tilted sideways. When the echo faded, Pastor Lewis whispered, "We've got enough. Let him come to court angry. Angry men tell on themselves. That night I walked the perimeter of my yard again. The roses were budding, thin green shoots breaking through the soil Daniel's truck had crushed. The sight steadied me. Nature has its own revenge. It grows where it was trampled. I added a final note to my ledger. April 27th, mediation failed. Defendant unstable. All systems prepared for May 20th as I closed the binder. Thunder rolled far off over Lake Erie. The storm was coming, and this time I was ready to let it hit. By the first week of May, the air in Cleveland carried that strange warmth before a thunderstorm, the kind that smells like iron and rain. I'd been waiting for this turn, the part where people who think they're clever start slipping on their own lies. On May 5th, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address, Hale and Partners. Attorneys at law. Daniel had finally lawyered up. I carried the envelope into my kitchen like it was toxic waste and laid it on the counter. Beside my binder, inside was a typed family management agreement. The language was smooth, professional, until you looked closer. It proposed that Daniel act as property manager of my house to assist with elder safety and maintenance, with a 10% fee on any future rental income. Harmless enough, until Harrow, my attorney, circled one buried clause in red ink: authorization for strategic refinancing, including new equity draws and management of proceeds. Harrow leaned back in his chair and gave a low whistle. They're trying to sneak in power of borrowing rights. If you'd signed this, your son could have taken out another mortgage in your name. I shook my head slowly. He's bold. I'll give him that. Arrogant, Harrow corrected. And sloppy. The agreement had one more gem, a screenshot of a phone reminder labeled Dad Safe Upgrade, April 12th. Harrow tapped it with his pen. They're calling the lock change a safety improvement. No date metadata, no photo of installation. We'll use that. He drafted a counteroffer right there: immediate return of all property, restoration of keys within 48 hours, and a written stipulation admitting the lock change occurred without consent. Send this certified, he said, and let's make him sweat. As he printed, my phone buzzed. It was Miguel, the locksmith. I found something, he said. Remember that night? Your son called from a Bluetooth line, but our voicemail system auto-backs up, calls for quality review. His voice is on the recording. Make it quiet, Dad loses track. Want me to forward it? My chest went tight. Yes, send it to my attorney. Within the hour, Harrow had the audio file saved, time-stamped and notarized. Proof Daniel had lied, and proof he'd manipulated me using my age as a weapon. That evening, another letter arrived. This time from the contractor who'd done the demo prep. The subject line read, Scope of work, April 12th. Inside was a bullet point list. Remove. Contents of bedroom dresser prepare for floor. Refinish secure valuables in chest, per client's request. There was Daniel's signature at the bottom. The dresser they mentioned wasn't just furniture. It held my wife's rosary, our marriage license, and our passports. I sat at Ruth's table staring at that paper. She placed a hand on mine. He didn't just steal things, Hank. He tried to rewrite who you are. I nodded. And he left the receipts to prove it. By May 10th, the puzzle had formed a perfect picture. Every lie came with its own paper trail. That's the thing about people who underestimate you. They don't think you'll know how to read their fine print. That night, Harrow called with quiet satisfaction. We've got a voicemail admission, fraudulent intent in writing, and financial motive confirmed. He's finished. Then let's make it public, I said. He chuckled. Patience, Mr. Hale. Court first. Just a second. Then we'll let the truth do the talking. As I hung up, Ruth walked in from the porch, holding a small box. Your cedar chest, she said softly. The contractor dropped it off. Said it was all a misunderstanding. I opened the lid. My wife's quilt was there, but the rosary and documents were gone. Only an empty velvet pouch remained. I closed the box and exhaled. "You can replace a lock," I said quietly. "You can't replace what it guarded." That night, I took one last walk around the house. The air smelled of coming rain, the same scent as the day they'd changed the locks. But this time, my fear was gone. I stopped at the gate, looked back at the porch light reflecting off that slick black deadbolt, and whispered to myself, "You thought this was a lockout, Daniel. It's a countdown," because I knew exactly what was coming. On May 20th, 9 a.m., Municipal Court. Room 3B, Hale v. Hale. The day my son would discover what happens when you cross a man who still keeps every receipt. May 20th arrived like the echo of a thunderclap. Grey sky over downtown. Cleveland, air thick with drizzle and that quiet, electric tension that comes before a storm breaks. I'd been awake since 4 a.m, pacing between the window and the table where my binder sat, neat, tabbed, alive with evidence. 38 years as an electrician had taught me one thing. When you've done the wiring right, all you have to do is flip the switch. Ruth drove me to the municipal courthouse in her old Buick. She wore a lavender scarf, said it was for luck. "Don't let him see you angry," she murmured as we parked. "Let the paper talk." "I plan to," I said, holding up the binder. "Every page in here speaks louder than my voice ever could." Inside room 3B, the lights hummed overhead, cold and flat. The walls smelled of disinfectant and time. At the front, the seal of Ohio gleamed behind the judge's bench. I took my seat beside Harrow, my attorney. Daniel sat 2 rows ahead, tapping his knee, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He didn't look at me. He wore a new suit, too shiny, too eager, and the same watch his mother had given him on his college graduation. I'd almost been proud that day. Judge Calder entered at exactly 9. Gavel, oath, silence. Case of Hale versus Hale, unlawful lockout and elder exploitation. Mr. Harrow, proceed. Harrow stood, smooth as a man tuning a radio. "Your Honor, the facts are plain. My client, Mr. Henry Hale, was hospitalized for emergency surgery on April 12th. During his absence, his son, Mr. Daniel Hale, changed the locks on his home, removed personal property, and initiated an unauthorized attempt to draw a home equity line of $120,000. He laid a neat arc of documents across the counsel table, each flagged with a yellow tab. We have dated video evidence, banking records, and contractor receipts confirming these acts. We also have a recorded voicemail where Mr. Daniel Hale instructs a locksmith to, quote, "Make it quiet, Dad loses track." The courtroom stirred, small gasps, a cough, someone's pen clattering to the floor. Harrow pressed play on his laptop. Daniel's voice filled the room, calm, careless, undeniable. "Make it quiet. Dad loses track." Daniel's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, context matters. My client was acting in good faith to protect his father's safety." Judge Calder held up a hand. "I'll decide what context matters, Counselor," Harrow continued. "The supposed safety measure included hiring a contractor for $2,800 to perform demo prep, which included removing the plaintiff's bedroom dresser and safe. The work order bears the defendant's signature." He passed the document up to the bench. "Page 2, Your Honor, specifies removal of valuables, a term that encompasses my client's marriage license, passports, and a family rosary." I watched the judge's brow lift slightly. "This was done while Mr. Hale was under anesthesia?" "Yes, Your Honor," Harrow replied. "Hospital records confirm admission at 6:05 a.m. and discharge at 2:47 p.m. the same day." Daniel shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. His attorney leaned in and whispered, but Daniel shook him off. Then under his breath he muttered, "He doesn't even remember half of it." I spoke before I realized I'd stood. "Your Honor, I remember everything that matters." The judge looked at me. "You may continue, Mr. Hale. My wife and I built that house together. Every receipt in that binder is part of our life. Every brass screw, every coat of paint. I wasn't confused. I was in surgery. And while I was lying there, my son, my own blood, was drilling a new lock into the front door and calling it safety. You could have heard a paperclip drop." Daniel's eyes flicked up to mine, anger and shame wrestling behind them. Harrow let the silence hang before he called the witnesses. Ruth was first. She approached the stand, clutching her phone. "I live next door," she said, her voice steady. "On April 12th, at about 3 in the morning, I saw a box truck outside Mr. Hale's house. Daniel and 2 men carried out boxes. My doorbell camera recorded everything." She handed over the SD card. The video played briefly. Grainy night vision, Daniel's face bright under the porch light, the safe in his arms. Then came Carla, the bank manager. The defendant initiated an online equity loan application the same morning. It was flagged for fraud due to mismatched authorization. She handed over the affidavit, signed and dated April 13th, 9:22 a.m. Harrow placed it gently on top of the stack. "Every act, every motive, and every dollar accounted for," he said. This was not care. It was conversion. Daniel's lawyer tried to pivot. "Your Honor, my client was acting under stress. The plaintiff's mental faculties are..." Judge Calder leaned forward. "Do you have any medical evidence suggesting incompetence?" "No, Your Honor." "Then drop that line before you lose your bar card." I caught Harrow's smirk faintly beside me. Finally, Pastor Lewis took the stand. "I've known Mr. Hale 30 years. He's sharp as a tack, keeps ledgers tighter than church donations. Daniel met me for mediation on April 27th, where he said, and I quote, 'Court won't throw out family.'" He looked right at Daniel. "But family shouldn't throw out a father either." The judge folded her hands. "I've heard enough." For a heartbeat, the room was pure silence. Then her voice cut through. "This court finds the defendant, Mr. Daniel Hale, acted without consent and in bad faith. A temporary restraining order is granted, restoring possession to the plaintiff immediately. Defendant is ordered to return all personal property and to cease contact except through counsel." The gavel cracked once. Sharp. Final. Daniel's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Then, almost poetically, a courier walked through the courtroom door. "Delivery for Daniel Hale," he said. Everyone turned. Daniel took the envelope, tore it open, and froze. It was a foreclosure pre-notice from his failed house flip. $74,000 past due. The judge frowned. "Mr. Hale, is there an issue?" He shook his head slowly, voice hollow. "No, Your Honor, just timing. I wanted to feel triumph. Instead, I felt the weight of something deeper. Justice, maybe, but heavy all the same." When the hearing adjourned, Ruth hugged me in the hallway. "It's over," she whispered. "Not quite," I said, clutching the binder. "Now comes the cleanup." As Daniel walked past, I didn't look at him. I just said quietly, "Keys go back where they belong." He stopped, trembling, then kept walking. Outside, the rain had turned steady. I lifted my face to it, felt the cold drops mix with something warmer behind my eyes. After weeks of lies and locks, I was home again, not just to my house, but to myself. Justice hadn't roared. It had whispered in the sound of a gavel and the rhythm of rain. When the gavel came down, I thought the noise would echo in my head for days. But by the time Ruth and I stepped out of the courthouse, all I could hear was rain on the stone steps and the hum of tires in the street. Justice, it turns out, doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like relief. The bailiff walked me down to the clerk's office for certified copies of the ruling. My hands didn't even shake as I signed the forms. "You've got full possession back," the clerk said, sliding the stamped order across the counter. The ink was still wet when I smiled for the first time in weeks. Daniel lingered in the hallway, talking quietly with his lawyer. When our eyes met, he looked smaller somehow, like a man waking from a bad dream. He wrote himself. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who helped me build the porch railing one summer, sweating and laughing under the sun. Then that image slipped away, replaced by the man who'd sold his father's trust for a few bad investments. Outside, Ruth opened her umbrella. "You hungry?" she asked. "No," I said. "I just want to go home." We drove through the drizzle back to Lakeshore Drive. At 2:15 p.m., Miguel, the locksmith, was already waiting. He gave me a nod and said, "Court call went good, huh?" "Better than I hoped." He knelt by the door and removed the black smart deadbolt in silence. The new brass lock gleamed in the afternoon light. Same make, same model as the one I'd installed myself years ago. When it clicked shut, it sounded like a full sentence ending with a period. Miguel handed me the smart lock wrapped in a paper bag. "Keep it," he said. "Evidence, or maybe a souvenir?" I looked at it and smiled. Lesson learned. That evening, Daniel's crew texted me. "We didn't know, man. He said you gave permission." They offered to return the cedar chest. Harrow replied for me, stating clear chain of custody instructions and a 48-hour deadline. 2 days later, a delivery van pulled up. They left the chest on the porch like a peace offering. Inside, I found my wife's quilt folded neatly, still carrying the faint scent of cedar. Her rosary was missing, but the empty indent where it used to rest was enough to remind me she'd still been here. "You can steal an object, but not its meaning." Carla from the bank called next. "Just wanted to confirm Daniel's name has been permanently flagged in our system. If he ever tries to open anything linked to you, I'll get the call myself." "Thank you, Carla," I said. "You've been my quiet guardian through all this." "Just doing my job," she replied, but I could hear the warmth in her voice. Pastor Lewis met me the next day to go over paperwork from the Elder Justice Coordinator. They'd opened a case file, mostly for record-keeping, since the court had already ruled in my favor. "Still," Pastor said, "this will make sure no one tries something like this again." That night I sat at my own kitchen table. Every item I'd lost had found its way home piece by piece. Even the silence felt cleaner. I wrote a new line at the bottom of my ledger, May 22nd, "Possession restored." Case closed, conscience clear. Then I walked to the door, turned the brass key, and heard that soft metallic click I'd been waiting for since April 12th. It wasn't just a sound. It was a promise. For the first time in weeks, I slept inside my house, under my own roof, and dreamed of nothing at all. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it comes in a manila envelope, hand-delivered by your lawyer, with your name spelled right on the first line. A week after the hearing, Harrow called me into his office. His tone was lighter, almost proud. "We've got a proposal," he said, sliding the papers across the desk. I read the heading, "Settlement Agreement, Hale versus Hale." The terms were clean, unflinching. Daniel would sign a full admission of unauthorized entry and lock change, reimburse my legal and repair costs, and agree to a 1-year no-contact order, except through counsel or Pastor Lewis. If he breached it, the injunction would convert automatically to a permanent order. Harrow folded his hands. "He's willing to sign if you don't press criminal charges." I stared at the page for a long minute. "I don't need him jailed," I said. "I just need the truth in ink." 2 days later, we met in Harrow's conference room, neutral ground. Daniel arrived first, eyes down, clutching a pen like it weighed 10 pounds. He'd lost that shiny arrogance he wore in court. He looked like a man stripped to the wiring. I didn't speak. I let Harrow guide the signing, initials on every page, final signature on the last. When Daniel reached the confession clause, he hesitated. Harrow cleared his throat. "You can't change what happened," he said softly. "But you can decide how it ends." Daniel pressed the pen down and signed. A single tear dropped onto the paper. For a second, I almost saw the boy who used to run barefoot through the yard, chasing fireflies while his mother laughed from the porch. The settlement required one more thing, a written letter of acknowledgement. Daniel slid it across to me after he finished. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Dad, I changed the locks on April 12th without your consent. I attempted to borrow against the house for my own debts. I told people you were confused when you weren't. I was wrong." He'd signed it at the bottom. No excuses, no conditions. Harrow notarized both documents, stamped them, and handed me the copies. "File them somewhere safe," he said. "They're your armor now." That night, I laid the papers in my cedar chest beside my wife's quilt. I added another folder labeled Justice. May 25th. When Carla at the bank heard about the outcome, she smiled over the phone. "You won, Hank." "No," I said. "I proved I never lost." The Elder Justice Coordinator called later that week. "We'll keep your case on record as a model for intervention," she said. "Most people don't fight back this cleanly." Clean. That word meant more to me than victory. My house felt clean again. No hidden lies under the floorboards, no guilt haunting the hallways. On May 26th, I replaced the black smart lock with the brass one I'd saved. The sound it made when I turned the key was like a prayer, firm, final. Then I hung my wife's wind chime by the porch window. When the lake breeze came through, it sang a soft tune, the same one she loved when she was alive. Justice doesn't roar. It hums. And in that hum, I finally heard peace returning home. The house was quiet again, the way it used to be when my wife was alive. Morning light poured through the kitchen curtains, turning the countertop into gold. I stood there with my coffee, no papers to sign, no calls to make. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ringing of the wind chime outside the window. Her chime, the one Daniel couldn't steal because it wasn't metal or wood. It was memory. I spent the next few days restoring little things that had gone neglected during the storm. I fixed the loose cabinet hinge in the pantry, repainted the front steps, planted new rose bushes where the truck had crushed the old ones. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because rebuilding is what a man does after he's been torn down. One evening, Ruth came over with a pie and sat with me on the porch swing. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of fresh earth. "It feels different out here," she said. "Peaceful," I answered. "You going to forgive him?" I stared out toward the roses, their petals opening under the orange sky. "Forgiveness isn't something you give for free," I said. "It's something you earn by facing what you broke." "He hasn't done that yet." She nodded slowly, understanding. Later that night I opened my old rainy day folder, the one that had started all this. I slipped in a new page titled "In Case of Hospitalization," again, and wrote out clear instructions. Contact Attorney Harrow immediately. Contact Pastor Lewis and Carla at Lake Shore Bank. No one is allowed to change locks, move property, or make financial decisions without written consent. I signed it, dated it, and left copies with Ruth and Harrow. That small act felt like sealing a door behind me, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The next morning I stood in front of my wife's rosebush, trimming away a dead branch. It was early, just after sunrise, the grass wet with dew. For a moment I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but steadier. There were lines on my face I hadn't noticed before, the kind you earn from surviving people you love. I said quietly, "We made it, love." He took the key, but he didn't take the home. After everything, the strangest part was the silence. I'd grown used to the noise of defense, the calls, the papers, the courtrooms. Now the quiet felt heavier, but not lonely, just earned neighbors started dropping by again. One of them, a widower named Frank, told me, "Heard what you did. You made the rest of us check our wills." I smiled. Then something good came out of it. Even Pastor Lewis mentioned the case in one of his sermons. He called it the story of a man who fought with paper instead of fists. People clapped. I didn't go up afterward, didn't need to. I already knew my piece was signed, stamped and filed. Before turning in that night, I wrote one last line in my ledger. Justice done. Trust restored, not in others, but in myself. Then I closed the notebook, turned the porch light off, and listened to the chime sing faintly through the dark. It wasn't a song of victory. It was a song of survival. The sound of a man coming home to himself again. A week after the settlement, my phone buzzed early one morning. The message was from Daniel. No greeting, no apology, just a photo. It showed the front door of his latest flip property. Pinned to it was a foreclosure notice in bold red letters. Final demand, $74,000 past due. For a long moment, I just stared at the image. Then I set the phone face down on the table beside my coffee mug and smiled, not out of spite, but out of recognition. There it was, the full circle. He'd tried to unlock my house for his gain, and the only door that opened was the one leading to his own ruin. I didn't reply. Silence was my signature now. Later that day, Pastor Lewis stopped by. He looked at the photo and let out a quiet whistle. "Poetic justice," he said. "You didn't even have to lift a finger." "I didn't need to," I said. "Gravity does the job once a man builds his life downhill." We sat on the porch, sipping coffee, while the lake breeze carried the scent of rain and roses. The house felt lighter, like it had exhaled everything rotten that had once lingered in its walls. I kept that smart deadbolt, the one Daniel installed, inside a small wooden box on the shelf beside my wife's quilt. On the lid, I taped a small white label, Lesson May, not Revenge. Just record-keeping. That night, Ruth came over to drop off a new cutting from her garden. For the empty spot near the fence, she said. It was a bright yellow rose, her way of saying sunshine after storm. You ever hear from him again? Got a picture of his door, I said. That's enough conversation for me, she smiled sadly. You're handling this better than most. I had help, I said, and paper. After she left, I stood in the living room, staring at the brass lock glinting under the porch light. My hand brushed the cool metal, the same one I'd installed with my wife's help 15 years ago. It was scratched and dented, but still worked perfectly. That lock had outlasted betrayal, surgery, and even a son's greed. Funny thing about solid brass, it ages, but it never breaks. Before bed, I opened my ledger one last time and wrote in neat block letters, May 30th. Closure achieved. How secure. Son adrifted, I paused, then added a final line beneath it. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. I closed the book, slid it into the cedar chest beside the wind chime instructions, and turned out the light. Some nights, when the wind hits just right, the chime outside the window still sings, soft, steady, like her voice saying, home. Hank, you made it home. That's the sound I sleep to now. Not locks clicking or doors closing, just the quiet truth that justice doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like peace, growing quietly where the damage once was. And if Daniel ever drives by this house again, he'll see the lights on, the roses in bloom, and a brass key turning smoothly in the door he once tried to claim. I won't open it for him. Not out of hate, out of history, because in the end the lock he changed became the lesson I kept.